The elder sister, Zoe, grasped ideas more quickly but spoke more slowly. Theodora was the opposite. She rarely expressed her thoughts, but once she spoke, she kept the conversation going with eloquence and vivacity. Zoe was a passionate woman, and I mean equally prepared for either alternative, life or death. She reminded me of the waves of the sea, sometimes lifting a ship to the top, sometimes dragging it down. Theodora lacked these obvious qualities. In fact, she had a calm, even, if I may say, dull personality. At the end of the 10th century, Basil II, the emperor of the Macedonian dynasty known as Bulgaroktonos, Bulgarian breaker, had wreaked havoc on Bulgarians and Arabs for 49 years. Just as he was about to attack Sicily, which was ruled by Arabs, he passed away unmarried and childless. His brother, Constantine VIII, co-emperor with Basil II, was an emperor more interested in horse racing and comedy shows than in state affairs. While he lived happily ever after with his wife Helena Olympia and daughters Eudocia, Theodora, and Zoe, fate, restless, spun its web again like a spider. Basil II, who left no heir, was succeeded by his niece Zoe, who became empress in her own right. She became one of 4 women to rule the Byzantine Empire in her own right, taking her place in 1,000 years of Byzantine history along with Pulcheria, Irene, and her sister Theodora. Despite the disapproval of contemporary historians and statesmen for a woman ruling the state, Zoe, who would even defend her rightful throne, title, and family, together with her sister and with the support of a huge people against those who dethroned her, ruled the empire together with her brother, with the support of her brother. God, do not leave your servants alone. So while her older sister Eudocia was still there, younger Zoe, in her palace room creating perfumes and essences, had raised 4 men to the ranks of emperor, showering them with status and wealth, sometimes by marriage, sometimes by adoption. One of the most important reasons for Zoe's fortunate rise to the throne was her poor older sister Eudocia. After contracting an illness at a young age, believed to be smallpox, the poor girl had withdrawn from the outside world and chosen to live as a nun. And yet, Zoe's marital adventures, like Theophanos, to whom she shared a similar fate, despite the lack of a throne or crown, began with her being sent to marry Theophanos' son, the Holy Roman Emperor Otto III. Basil II's intention, of course, was not let the young people get along, live happily, and we too can have grandchildren. This marriage, seen as a purely diplomatic and political affair, was intended to unite 2 Roman empires divided by religious reasons. However, the emperor's planned marriage was not as he had hoped. Upon arriving in Bari, Italy, Zoe learned that her prospective groom had passed away. She immediately returned to the capital saying, "I'm young, beautiful, what's wrong with me?" to meet with the new candidates and have a glass of wine. No tea or coffee back then, of course. While wondering who was better, the Dalacenis or the city's governor, Romanos Argyros, Zoe, believing she had found true love, was sadly mistaken. She said yes to the marriage with Romanos, who had left his wife Helena to become emperor, and they were crowned together.
My fate is dark. Desiring to consummate her marriage, Zoe consulted doctors, or resorted to magical amulets, to crown her happiness with a baby. But she couldn't achieve her wish. She was 48 when she married, and having children was biologically impossible. Romanos, however, rejected Zoe after gaining a title and wealth, leaving her alone. As if that weren't enough, he even barred her from entering the treasury, preventing the benevolent and protective Empress from her charitable work. Zoe was unhappy, lonely, unable to find the fulfillment and joy she sought in her marriage, and she had been betrayed. The one who would mend her broken heart and bring her back to life was none other than her assistant, John the orphanatrophus. Thanks to John, who introduced Zoe to his young nephew, the life of the blonde Empress was suddenly brightened when Mikhail of Paphlagon, 30 years her junior, entered her life. Unable to keep her secret love to herself, Zoe grew weary of her desire and plotted to eliminate her husband, which she did. Byzantine historians Psellos and Skylights also suggest that Romanos did not die a natural death, but was drowned or poisoned. With Romanos's death, Zoe's second marriage was no longer an obstacle. According to the law, a widow was required to wait a year before marrying. However, according to John Skylights' writings, since the widow was an empress, this minor issue was resolved with 50 pounds of gold.
From the beginning, Zoe viewed Michael not as an emperor or husband, but as a worshipful slave. Whether this was the cause, or perhaps because of it, Michael IV's ill treatment of Zoe gradually overshadowed Zoe's happiness. Michael had long forgotten his promises and oaths. Young Michael was racked with guilt for killing Romanos, so he tried to keep the Empress out of power, and then himself. As if that weren't enough, Michael struggled with epileptic seizures while trying to suppress the Bulgarian rebellion. Fortunately, the rebellion was crushed in 1040, but Michael was no longer the Michael he once was. His illness had advanced. He dismissed the aging Empress who came to see him. In 1041, Zoe, having also delivered Michael to the Black Earth, enthroned Michael Calaphates, the nephew of John the orphanatrophus, whom she had adopted and elevated to the rank of Caesar, as Michael V. They agreed that they would rule the empire together. Unable to suppress the devil's voice within him, Michael V, although he ruled the state as emperor, faced a harsh reality. Despite everything and everyone, Zoe was still a member of the dynasty and his uncle's heir. The Porphyrogenita, who held true power and legitimacy, posed a grave threat to Michael as long as she lived with the title and right of birth in the palace chamber, painted in the same color as the emperor's purple robe. Therefore, she had to be rid of Zoe as quickly as possible, and of course of John, her henchman, and paving the way for her to ascend to the throne. Being neither princess nor heir could prevent Michael V's evil deeds against Zoe and John. Michael first condemned his uncle to exile in a monastery, and then exiled Zoe to the monastery on Bucata, her hair cut off, and her clothes shabby as a nun. This unexpected slap provoked Zoe to utter the following words as she left her palace. "You are my uncle and emperor. You were the one who loved me and honored me more than my sisters. For, as I have heard from those who saw you, I was just like you. You were the one who kissed me and held me in your arms, saying, 'May you live long, my dear child, and be the honor of our family and the treasure of our empire.' You were also the one who carefully raised and educated me, for you saw the future of this empire in my hands. But your hopes were dashed, for I have lost my honor and brought dishonor to my entire family. I beg you, watch over me in heaven and protect your nephew with all your might." Whether the women and children of Constantinople heard Zoe's cries is unknown, but the women of this city reacted most unexpectedly to Mikhail, who considered himself ruler of the land. The women of Constantinople stood up for Zoe, the Empress. Recognizing her as the true ruler and the continuation of the dynasty, they recalled her to her rightful throne and bravely confronted Mikhail. Psellos describes their justified rebellion as follows. "I saw with my own eyes the women who had never left the harem before, walking through the streets, shouting, beating their breasts, and lamenting the Empress's misfortune. Where is the Empress, the only noble and beautiful woman?
Where can she be, the only free woman among all, the head of the entire dynasty, the true owner of the empire, the empress whose father was an emperor, whose grandfather, yes, whose great-grandfather was also an emperor? The fervor of the women's rebellion grew. When Zoe's sister Theodora joined the rebels, Zoe was removed from the convent and presented herself before the people in her nun's garb. The people could not recognize the empress, especially in her slovenly attire. Zoe, dressed in empress robes, was then brought from the grand palace to Hagia Sophia in triumph to join Theodora. Mikhail V was blinded on Theodora's orders and abdicated.
Caesar's right is Caesar's. When Michael abdicated, two candidates emerged, Zoe and Theodora. The Senate was left undecided. On one side was Zoe, the elder sister who would inherit the throne and crown, and on the other, the younger sister, Theodora, who had saved the throne by supporting the rebellion. When the decision fell to Zoe, Zoe declared her sister co-empress, and, like her father, they began to rule the empire together. For the first time in Byzantine history, two empresses, despite the ancient traditions of the Senate, where the voices were predominantly male, gave the Byzantines a first. They emerged from the gynaeconitis, harem, and began actively governing the country. Girls born in the Purple Chamber became the voices of a vast empire. During their lifetimes, they gained power and titles through the privileges of blood and dynasty, not gender. The sisters, striving to prevent bribery and nepotism in the Senate, welcomed ambassadors together, made important decisions in the palace, delivered judgments, and jointly handled all governmental matters. Zoe, growing weary over time, married Constantine Monomachos, a man from a wealthy and noble family, in 1042, believing he would help her. Some believe that Zoe married Constantine out of boredom with sharing the throne with her brother and out of disagreement.
Theodora retained her title as empress after her sister's marriage. She only temporarily withdrew from state affairs. Zoe, however, devoted herself to her perfumes and charitable work, leaving some of the palace affairs to Constantine Monomachos' lover, Maria Sklarina. When she died in 1050 at the age of 70, her sister Theodora and Constantine ruled the empire jointly. After Constantine's death, Theodora remained unmarried and became sole ruler. Like her uncle Basil, Theodora returned to the throne as a slaying and slaughtering autocrat, overthrowing all who opposed her, confiscating their property and possessions, and exiling her enemies. Although Theodora's rule was condemned as evil by Psellos, she defended her throne as the last bastion of the Macedonians against any attempt to seize it. Before his death, he declared bureaucrat Michael Bringas his heir, and passed away in 1056 as the last member of the Macedonian dynasty. After the deaths of these two remarkable women, the Byzantine Empire was shaken by throne struggles until 1081, when Alexius of the Komnenos family seized the throne and put an end to these battles for the throne.